There are moments in life when reality strikes with such brutal clarity that it shatters every comfortable illusion you have held about how the world works. These moments do not arrive with fanfare or warning. They slip through the cracks of your carefully constructed worldview like water finding its way through stone, and suddenly you are standing in the wreckage of everything you thought you knew. You who have come here tonight, perhaps drawn by some restless stirring in your soul, some whisper that tells you there is more to understand about the architecture of existence itself. You sense it, do you not? That there are truths moving beneath the surface of your daily experience, truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding because to face them would require a kind of courage that our culture does not teach. I do not speak to you of simple life advice or motivational platitudes. No, what we are about to explore together cuts far deeper than that. We are venturing into the territory of those harsh revelations that arrive uninvited, usually decades too late, when the patterns of our lives have already been set in stone and the price of ignorance has already been paid in full. These are the lessons that no one wants to tell you when you are young, because they fear it will steal your innocence, your hope, your willingness to engage with life itself. But innocence, when it persists beyond its natural season, becomes not a virtue, but a liability. It becomes a blindness that leaves you vulnerable to forces you never learned to recognize, patterns you never learned to break, and cycles you never learned to escape. The world is not what they told you it would be. The people around you are not who they appear to be. The voice in your head that you call yourself is not as trustworthy as you believe, and the path you are walking, the one that feels so certain and inevitable, may be leading you toward a destination you never consciously chose. But here is what makes this exploration sacred rather than merely cynical. These harsh truths are not punishments. They are not evidence that life is meaningless or that hope is foolish. They are instead the keys to a deeper form of wisdom, a more authentic way of being, a relationship with reality that is built on solid ground rather than wishful thinking. Every person who has ever lived with genuine depth, who has ever created something meaningful, who has ever loved with real courage rather than mere sentiment, has had to walk through the valley of these difficult recognitions. They have had to let their naive selves die so that their true selves could be born. The first harsh lesson that arrives, usually in the form of profound disappointment, is that your childhood dreams were not prophecies but fantasies. The world you were promised as a child, where hard work automatically leads to reward, where good people are protected from harm, where justice prevails and truth always wins, that world exists only in the stories we tell to make sense of chaos. You discover this when you watch someone with less talent and less integrity surpass you simply because they understood the game you refused to acknowledge was being played. You discover it when you realize that your parents, those giants who seemed to know everything, were just frightened children in adult bodies, making it up as they went along, passing their own unhealed wounds down to you like an inheritance you never asked for. The second lesson follows closely behind the first. Most people, including yourself, are not who they pretend to be. We are all wearing masks, but the tragedy is that we have worn them so long, we have forgotten they are masks. The person you present to the world, the one who says the right things and performs the expected roles, is a construction designed to keep you safe, to help you belong, to protect you from the terror of being truly seen. But this false self, this carefully curated version of who you think you should be, becomes a prison. You begin to suffocate inside your own performance. You lose touch with your authentic desires, your real thoughts, your genuine reactions. You become a stranger to yourself, and then you wonder why nothing feels quite right, why success feels hollow, why relationships feel shallow, why you feel so alone even when surrounded by people who claim to love you. The third lesson is perhaps the most devastating. Time is not infinite, and most of it will be wasted. Not wasted in the obvious ways, not through laziness or procrastination, though those play their part. No, time is wasted through the unconscious living of an unlived life, through the endless postponement of authentic engagement with your own existence. You realize this when you look back and see that years, sometimes decades, have passed in a kind of trance. You were busy, certainly. You were productive, responsible, engaged with the world. But you were not present. You were not choosing your life. You were being chosen by it. You were not the author of your story. You were merely a character playing a role someone else had written. The fourth lesson strikes at the heart of how you understand relationships. Most of what you call love is actually need disguised as affection. The romantic ideal that was sold to you, the notion that somewhere out there is another person who will complete you, who will heal your wounds and fill your emptiness, is not love but addiction. Real love, you discover, is not the desperate clinging to another person as a source of validation or security. It is not the merger of two incomplete beings hoping to create one whole one. Real love is the meeting of two people who have done the difficult work of becoming whole within themselves, who choose to walk together, not because they cannot survive alone, but because they can create something beautiful together. But this understanding comes only after you have experienced the counterfeit, only after you have mistaken obsession for devotion, possession for protection, control for care. It comes after you have been both the one who devours and the one who is devoured, after you have learned that the hungriest love is often the most dangerous. The fifth lesson reveals itself in the realm of success and achievement. Most of what you have been taught to pursue will not satisfy you, and most of what would satisfy you has been trained out of you. The goals that society holds up as worthy, the achievements that are supposed to bring happiness and meaning, are often elaborate distractions from the real work of being human. You climb the mountain that everyone said you should climb, only to discover that the view from the top is not what you were promised. The promotion, the recognition, the accumulation of wealth or status or possessions brings a momentary relief but no lasting fulfillment. Instead, it brings a kind of existential fatigue, a sense that you have been running in the wrong direction for a very long time. Meanwhile, the things that actually nourish the soul, the simple pleasures and profound connections that make life worth living, have been pushed to the margins of your attention. You have forgotten how to be still, how to listen, how to receive beauty, how to rest in the present moment without needing it to be anything other than what it is. The sixth lesson emerges from the shadows of your own psyche. You are not as good a person as you believe yourself to be, and this is not a failing but an opportunity. The comfortable story you tell yourself about your own moral character, your own motivations, your own impact on others, is largely a fiction designed to protect your ego from uncomfortable truths. You have been selfish when you thought you were being generous. You have been cruel when you thought you were being kind. You have projected your own unhealed wounds onto others and called it insight. You have used your pain as an excuse for causing pain. You have manipulated situations to your advantage while convincing yourself you were being helpful. This recognition is not meant to crush you, but to free you. When you stop defending an idealized version of yourself, you can begin to work with who you actually are. When you acknowledge your capacity for selfishness, cruelty, and deception, you can begin to make conscious choices about which aspects of your nature you will feed and which you will starve. The seventh lesson cuts to the core of how you understand suffering. Most of your pain is optional, and most of your solutions are making it worse. You have been taught to fear discomfort, to avoid difficulty, to medicate or distract yourself from anything that feels challenging. But in doing so, you have created a life of chronic, low-level suffering punctuated by moments of acute crisis. The pain you are trying to escape is often the very thing that is trying to teach you, to transform you, to show you where your life has gone off course. But instead of listening to it, you fight it. Instead of learning from it, you try to eliminate it. Instead of allowing it to do its work, you turn it into an enemy. The eighth lesson arrives like a cold wind through the chambers of your heart. The people you love most will disappoint you, and you will disappoint them in return. And this is not a failure of love, but its very nature. The romantic mythology of unconditional acceptance, of souls that understand each other perfectly, of relationships that exist without friction or misunderstanding, is a beautiful lie that causes untold suffering. Those closest to you will let you down precisely because they matter most. They will fail to see you when you most need to be seen. They will withdraw their support when you are most vulnerable. They will choose their own comfort over your needs, their own fears over your dreams. And you, in your own unconscious moments, will do the same to them. But beneath this harsh recognition lies a deeper truth. Love is not the absence of disappointment, but the willingness to continue loving through it. It is not the elimination of conflict, but the courage to engage with it honestly. It is not the pretense of perfection, but the acceptance of brokenness as the raw material from which genuine intimacy is forged. The ninth lesson emerges from the ruins of your certainties. Most of what you believe to be true is simply what you have been conditioned to believe, and most of your opinions are not your own, but borrowed from sources you have never questioned. The thoughts that feel most personal, most obviously correct, most fundamental to who you are often the ones that have been planted deepest by forces you never learned to recognize. Your political views, your religious beliefs, your ideas about success and failure, love and relationships, right and wrong. These are not the products of careful consideration, but of cultural programming so pervasive you mistake it for natural law. You have been living inside someone else's dream of reality, calling it your own awakening. This recognition is not meant to leave you in relativistic despair, but to invite you into the terrifying freedom of actually thinking for yourself. When you realize that your beliefs are choices rather than facts, you can begin to examine them, to test them against your lived experience, to keep what serves your authentic development and release what keeps you trapped in borrowed limitations. The 10th lesson strikes at the foundation of your relationship with time itself. You have been living as if death were a distant theoretical possibility, rather than the one certainty that gives weight to every moment. You plan for futures that may never arrive while ignoring the present that is slipping through your fingers like water. The awareness of mortality is not meant to paralyze you with fear, but to awaken you to the preciousness of what you have been taking for granted. When you truly understand that this conversation, this breath, this opportunity to choose differently may be your last, everything changes. The petty concerns that have consumed your attention reveal themselves as distractions from the real business of being alive. But this lesson comes only after you have wasted years, perhaps decades, living as if you had infinite time to figure things out, infinite opportunities to make things right, infinite chances to become who you were meant to be. It comes when someone you love dies unexpectedly, when your own body betrays you, when you realize that the time for preparation has passed and the time for living is now. The 11th lesson reveals itself in the quiet moments between your thoughts. You are more alone than you have ever admitted, and this aloneness is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be embraced. The constant noise of social connection, the endless stream of communication and entertainment and distraction has been covering up a fundamental truth about human existence. You came into this world alone, you will leave it alone, and in between these two events, you are fundamentally responsible for creating meaning from the raw material of your individual experience. No one else can live your life for you. No one else can make your choices. No one else can bear the consequences of your actions or the weight of your unrealized potential. This aloneness is not abandonment, but autonomy. It is not isolation, but individuation. When you stop running from solitude, when you learn to be comfortable in your own company, when you discover that your own mind can be a friend rather than an enemy, you begin to relate to others not from neediness, but from wholeness. The 12th lesson emerges from the shadows of your family history. You have been unconsciously repeating patterns that were set in motion long before you were born, and most of your problems are not original but inherited. The struggles you thought were uniquely yours, the self-destructive behaviors you cannot explain, the relationships that keep failing in the same ways. These are often echoes of unresolved trauma that has been passed down through generations like a curse. Your mother's anxiety becomes your perfectionism. Your father's rage becomes your depression. Your grandmother's fear of abandonment becomes your inability to trust. The family system that shaped you was itself shaped by forces its members never fully understood, and without conscious intervention, you will pass these same patterns to the next generation. But recognition of these patterns is the beginning of their dissolution. When you see clearly how the past lives within you, you can begin to choose which aspects of your inheritance to honor and which to transform. You can become the one who breaks the chain, who heals what your ancestors could not heal, who creates new possibilities for those who come after you. The 13th lesson cuts through the illusions of control that have governed your approach to life. Most of what happens to you is beyond your influence, and your attempts to control outcomes are often what create the very suffering you are trying to avoid. You have been living under the exhausting delusion that if you just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, worry thoroughly enough, you can guarantee the results you desire. But life is not a machine that responds predictably to your inputs. It is a living system, chaotic and creative, responsive to forces you cannot see, and influenced by variables you cannot calculate. Your desperate attempts to control circumstances, other people, even your own thoughts and feelings, create a tension that distorts your perception and limits your ability to respond skillfully to what is actually happening. The paradox is that when you release the illusion of control, you often find that you have more genuine influence than when you were trying to force outcomes. When you work with reality rather than against it, when you respond to what is rather than demanding what should be, you discover a kind of power that flows from alignment rather than resistance. The 14th lesson reveals itself in the mirror of your own mortality. You have been living as if your current problems and preoccupations will last forever, when in fact they are temporary disturbances in an existence that is itself temporary. The crisis that feels so overwhelming today will be forgotten within years. The relationship that seems so crucial now may be irrelevant within months. The achievement you are desperately pursuing may prove meaningless within decades. This is not nihilism but perspective. When you zoom out from the drama of your immediate circumstances and see your life from the vantage point of eternity, many of your worries reveal themselves as elaborate fictions. The things you thought were so important lose their grip on you. The fears that seemed so justified dissolve into the background of a much larger story. But this perspective comes only after you have suffered unnecessarily, only after you have tortured yourself with concerns that time will prove irrelevant, only after you have missed countless opportunities for joy because you were trapped in the prison of your own anxious projections about an imaginary future. The 15th lesson emerges from the depths of your own psyche. You have been at war with parts of yourself that are not your enemies but your allies in disguise. The anger you have been trying to suppress may be trying to teach you about boundaries. The sadness you have been trying to escape may be trying to show you what matters. The fear you have been trying to overcome may be trying to protect something precious. Your emotions are not random disturbances to be managed, but intelligent responses to your environment that deserve to be heard and understood. Your symptoms are not pathologies to be eliminated, but messages from parts of yourself that have been ignored or misunderstood. Your darkness is not a mistake to be corrected, but a necessary counterbalance to your light. When you stop fighting yourself and start listening to yourself, when you approach your own complexity with curiosity rather than judgment, when you treat your inner conflicts as information rather than evidence of failure, you begin to discover resources you never knew you possessed. The 16th lesson strikes like lightning through the comfortable narratives you have constructed about your own goodness. You have been using your virtues as weapons and your wounds as excuses, and this unconscious manipulation has poisoned more relationships than your acknowledged flaws ever could. The very qualities you pride yourself on, your empathy, your generosity, your loyalty, have become subtle instruments of control, ways of binding others to you through obligation disguised as love. You give not from abundance, but from a desperate need to be needed. You listen not to truly hear, but to position yourself as indispensable. You sacrifice not from genuine care, but from a terror of being abandoned. And when your hidden contracts are not honored, when your unspoken expectations are not met, you become the wounded martyr, using your pain as evidence of others' failures rather than examining the unconscious bargains you have been making. This recognition arrives like a sword through the heart of your self-concept. The helper discovers they have been the manipulator. The giver realizes they have been the taker. The loving one sees they have been the controlling one. But this devastating insight is also the doorway to authentic relationship, to love that flows from wholeness rather than emptiness, to service that liberates rather than enslaves. The 17th lesson emerges from the ruins of your spiritual seeking. You have been searching for enlightenment, peace, and transcendence in all the wrong places, treating your awakening as a destination to reach rather than a reality to embody. The books you have read, the teachers you have followed, the practices you have adopted have often become elaborate forms of spiritual materialism, ways of accumulating insights and experiences that you mistake for actual transformation. You collect wisdom like trophies, speaking the language of awakening while remaining fundamentally asleep to the miracle of ordinary existence. You chase peak experiences and mystical states while ignoring the sacred that pulses through every mundane moment. You seek to transcend your humanity rather than fully inhabit it, to escape the messiness of earthly existence rather than find the divine within it. True awakening, you discover, is not the attainment of some elevated state, but the recognition of what has always been present. It is not the elimination of problems, but a fundamental shift in your relationship to them. It is not the achievement of permanent bliss, but the capacity to meet whatever arises with presence and grace. The 18th lesson cuts through the illusion of linear progress that has shaped your approach to personal development. You are not broken and do not need to be fixed, but you have been trying to solve the puzzle of yourself using pieces that were never meant to fit together. The therapeutic culture that promised you healing through understanding, growth through techniques, transformation through effort, has often kept you trapped in an endless cycle of self-improvement that never arrives at self-acceptance. You have been treating your psyche like a machine to be optimized rather than a mystery to be lived. You have been trying to eliminate your contradictions rather than learning to dance with them. You have been seeking to become someone else rather than discovering who you already are beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. The paradox is that the very seeking for wholeness often perpetuates the sense of fragmentation. When you stop trying to fix yourself and start accepting yourself, when you cease the endless project of self-improvement and begin the practice of self-compassion, something shifts, not because you have solved anything, but because you have stopped treating yourself as a problem to be solved. The 19th lesson reveals itself through the mirror of your own projections. The people who trigger you most intensely are not your enemies but your teachers, reflecting back aspects of yourself that you have refused to acknowledge. The qualities that most disgust you in others are often the shadow expressions of your own disowned traits. The behaviors that most enrage you are frequently the very ones you engage in unconsciously. The colleague whose arrogance infuriates you may be showing you your own hidden superiority complex. The friend whose neediness exhausts you may be reflecting your own disguised dependency. The family member whose criticism wounds you may be mirroring your own harsh inner judge. Every strong emotional reaction is an invitation to look inward, to discover what is being triggered within you that has little to do with the external trigger. This is perhaps the most humbling recognition of all, that your judgments of others are often confessions about yourself, that your criticisms reveal more about your inner landscape than about those you are criticizing, that the world you perceive is largely a reflection of the world you carry within you. The 20th lesson strikes at the foundation of how you understand success and failure. Most of your victories have come through surrender rather than effort, and most of your defeats have resulted from trying too hard rather than not hard enough. The Western mythology of achievement through willpower, of overcoming obstacles through force, of winning through sheer determination, has taught you to approach life like a battle to be won, rather than a dance to be joined. You have been pushing when you should have been yielding, forcing when you should have been allowing, controlling when you should have been trusting. The opportunities that have changed your life most profoundly have often come not through your strategic planning, but through your willingness to let go of your plans. The solutions to your most pressing problems have emerged not from your anxious thinking, but from the spaces between your thoughts. There is a wisdom in yielding that your culture has forgotten, an intelligence in receptivity that your education never taught you, a power in surrender that your conditioning has trained you to fear. When you learn to work with the natural flow of life rather than against it, when you discover how to be purposeful without being rigid, you find that the universe often conspires to support what serves the greater whole. The 21st lesson emerges from the depths of your relationship with time. You have been living in the future or the past, while the only moment in which life actually occurs continues to slip by unnoticed. The present moment, the only reality you ever actually encounter, has become a way station between memories and fantasies, a brief pause between regrets and anxieties. You plan for happiness as if it were a destination you will someday reach rather than a choice you can make right now. You remember joy as if it were something that happened to you in the past rather than something available in this instant. You wait for conditions to be perfect before allowing yourself to fully engage with life, not realizing that the conditions will never be perfect and that waiting is just another form of postponing your own existence. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat is not preparation for your real life. It is your real life. The conversation you are having right now, the sensations you are feeling in your body, the thoughts arising in your mind, this is not the rehearsal. This is the performance. There is nowhere else to go and nothing else to wait for, because everything you have been seeking is available right here, right now, in the fullness of your present experience. The 22nd lesson reveals itself in the architecture of your daily choices. You have been unconsciously designing a life that serves your fears rather than your dreams, making decisions based on what you want to avoid rather than what you want to create. The job you stay in not because it fulfills you, but because it feels safe. The relationship you maintain not because it nourishes you, but because it feels familiar. The city you live in not because it inspires you, but because it requires no courage to remain. You have been sleepwalking through your own existence, making choices that minimize risk rather than maximize aliveness, that preserve comfort rather than promote growth, that maintain the status quo rather than honor your deepest longings. Each small compromise, each postponement of authentic action, each choice made from fear rather than love, has contributed to the construction of a life that feels somehow not quite your own. But awareness of this pattern is the beginning of its transformation. When you recognize how thoroughly fear has been your unconscious guide, you can begin to make different choices. When you see clearly how you have been designing your life around what you do not want, you can start creating based on what you do want. When you acknowledge how much of your existence has been reactive, you can begin to live proactively. The 23rd lesson strikes through the comfortable mythology of your own independence. You are far more interconnected with everything and everyone around you than you have ever allowed yourself to recognize, and your attempts to maintain separation and self-sufficiency have cut you off from sources of wisdom, support, and nourishment that could transform your experience of being alive. The rugged individualism that your culture has taught you to value has become a prison of isolation. The self-reliance that you have cultivated as a virtue has become a barrier to receiving help. The independence that you have pursued as strength has become a form of impoverishment, cutting you off from the web of relationships and reciprocity that makes life rich and meaningful. You are not a separate self navigating an alien world, but an expression of the world itself, a temporary crystallization of the same energy that moves through all things. Your breath is borrowed from the atmosphere. Your body is constructed from the elements of ancient stars. Your thoughts arise from the collective intelligence of your species. To pretend otherwise is not strength, but delusion. Not freedom, but bondage to an illusion that creates unnecessary suffering. The 24th lesson emerges from the shadows of your own mortality. You have been living as if you had unlimited time to become who you were meant to be, unlimited chances to express your gifts, unlimited opportunities to love fully and create meaningfully. But time is the one resource that cannot be renewed, and every day you postpone authentic engagement with your own potential is a day that will never come again. The book you have been meaning to write, the conversation you have been avoiding, the creative project that lives in your imagination, the relationship that could flourish if you were willing to be vulnerable, the adventure that calls to your soul, the service that would give your life meaning. These are not items on a someday list, but invitations from life itself that expire with each passing moment. Death is not the opposite of life, but its most intimate companion, the presence that gives urgency to love, meaning to choice, and weight to every moment. When you truly understand that your time here is finite and precious, that your opportunities to make a difference are limited and irreplaceable, everything changes. The trivial concerns that have consumed your attention lose their grip. The authentic longings that you have been postponing demand your immediate attention. The 25th lesson arrives like a whisper in the darkness of your deepest loneliness. You have been confusing connection with consumption, intimacy with intensity, and love with need, creating relationships that starve both parties while appearing to nourish them. The bonds you have forged, the partnerships you have built, the friendships you have cultivated, so many of them have been unconscious agreements to avoid facing your own emptiness rather than genuine meetings between whole beings. You enter relationships not as an offering but as a petition, not as a gift but as a transaction, not as presence but as absence seeking to be filled. You mistake the temporary relief of merger for the permanent satisfaction of authentic connection. You confuse the drama of emotional turbulence with the depth of real intimacy. You trade your authentic self for the promise of being wanted, needed, chosen, not realizing that what is chosen is not actually you, but the performance you have created to avoid abandonment. The hunger for connection that drives you into these hollow exchanges is not itself the problem. The longing for understanding, for witness, for shared meaning, these are holy desires that point toward your deepest nature as a relational being. But when this hunger becomes desperation, when this longing becomes demand, when this desire becomes addiction, it transforms from a bridge between souls into a wall that keeps genuine intimacy at bay. The 26th lesson reveals itself through the wreckage of your own good intentions. You have been trying to help others in ways that ultimately harm them, and trying to fix problems in ways that perpetuate them, because you have never learned to distinguish between true service and unconscious interference. The advice you give so freely often serves your need to feel wise more than their need for guidance. The support you offer so generously often enables their dependency more than it empowers their growth. You rescue when you should witness. You solve when you should listen. You intervene when you should allow. Your helping has become a subtle form of controlling. Your caring a disguised form of managing. Your love a refined form of manipulation. Not because you are malicious, but because you have never examined the unconscious contracts that govern your relationships, the hidden expectations that underlie your generosity, the unacknowledged needs that drive your service. True helping, you discover, requires a kind of emptiness, a willingness to be present without agenda, to offer without attachment to outcome, to serve without need for recognition or gratitude. It requires the humility to acknowledge that you do not know what is best for another person, the wisdom to trust their own capacity for growth, the courage to let them struggle with their own lessons rather than depriving them of the strength that comes through earned experience. The 27th lesson cuts through the comfortable narratives about your own growth and evolution. You have been mistaking insight for transformation, understanding for embodiment, and talking about change for actually changing. The therapy sessions that gave you new vocabulary for old patterns. The spiritual teachings that provided new concepts for unchanged behaviors. The self-help books that offered new theories for persistent problems. All of these have created the illusion of progress while the fundamental structure of your life remains essentially unaltered. You know why you do what you do, but you keep doing it anyway. You understand your patterns, but you continue to repeat them. You recognize your triggers, but you still get triggered. You have accumulated tremendous knowledge about the mechanics of human psychology, the principles of spiritual development, the strategies of personal growth, yet somehow this knowledge has not translated into the lived experience of being different. The gap between knowing and being, between insight and integration, between theory and practice, this chasm has become the dwelling place of your spiritual bypassing, your intellectual defense against the raw work of actual transformation. Real change happens not in the mind but in the body, not through understanding but through experience, not through analysis but through embodied practice repeated until new neural pathways are carved and old patterns naturally dissolve. The 28th lesson emerges from the ruins of your career ambitions and professional achievements. You have been climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls, pursuing success in games whose rules were written by people who were themselves profoundly lost. The definitions of accomplishment that have guided your choices, the metrics of worth that have measured your progress, the goals that have consumed your energy, most of these have been inherited rather than chosen, imposed rather than discovered. You have been running a race toward a finish line you never actually wanted to cross, in service of values you never consciously examined, toward a vision of the good life that was programmed into you before you were old enough to question it. The promotion you worked so hard to earn feels empty. The recognition you craved brings no lasting satisfaction. The financial security you sought creates new forms of anxiety. The status you achieved separates you from the very connections that might bring meaning. Meanwhile, the work that would actually fulfill you, the contribution that would utilize your unique gifts, the service that would align with your deepest values, remains unexplored because it does not fit the template of success you were taught to pursue. You have been optimizing your life for metrics that do not measure what matters most, achieving victories that feel like defeats, winning games you never wanted to play. The 29th lesson strikes at the heart of your relationship with your own body. You have been treating your physical form as an inconvenience to be managed rather than as a source of wisdom to be consulted, a vehicle to be maintained rather than a teacher to be honored. The signals your body sends, the information it provides, the guidance it offers, you have learned to ignore, suppress, or medicate rather than listen to and learn from. Your body knows when you are in the wrong place with the wrong people doing the wrong thing, but you have been trained to override its intelligence with mental reasoning. Your body responds to truth and lies, to alignment and betrayal, to nourishment and poison, with an accuracy that your mind cannot match, yet you trust your thoughts more than your sensations, your concepts more than your felt experience, your ideas about reality more than reality itself. The chronic tension in your shoulders is not random, but meaningful. The persistent fatigue that no amount of rest seems to cure is not mysterious, but informative. The digestive issues, the headaches, the insomnia, the inexplicable aches and pains, these are not simply mechanical failures, but communications from an intelligence that knows things your conscious mind has not yet grasped. The 30th lesson reveals itself in the mirror of your own judgments and criticisms. You have been projecting your own disowned qualities onto the world around you and then fighting them as if they were external enemies, creating conflicts that exist primarily in your own psyche. The political positions that enrage you often represent aspects of your own nature that you have exiled. The social behaviors that disgust you frequently mirror your own shadow expressions that you refuse to acknowledge. The world you perceive as broken, corrupt, hopeless is often a reflection of your own inner landscape projected onto the screen of external reality. The people you see as ignorant, selfish, unconscious are often carrying the very qualities you have split off from your own self-concept and refuse to integrate. Your righteous anger at the state of things is often displaced rage at your own powerlessness, your own complicity, your own participation in the very systems you claim to oppose. This is not to suggest that real problems do not exist or that all conflict is mere projection, but it is to recognize that your emotional charge around external circumstances often reveals more about your internal condition than about the objective situation you are observing. When you own your projections, when you reclaim your disowned parts, when you take responsibility for your own shadow, the world begins to look different, not because it has changed, but because you are seeing it through different eyes. The 31st lesson emerges from the depths of your own creative potential. You have been waiting for permission, for perfect conditions, for external validation, for someone else to give you the green light to express what is most alive within you. The creative impulses that arise in your quietest moments, the visions that visit you in dreams, the ideas that excite you in conversation, the projects that would bring you alive, you have been treating these as luxuries rather than necessities, as hobbies rather than callings, as someday possibilities rather than present imperatives. You have been living as if creativity were a talent reserved for special people rather than the birthright of every human being, as if artistic expression were a privilege for those who have already achieved security rather than a pathway to meaning that is available regardless of circumstances. You have been waiting to become qualified, to gain more skill, to have more time, to feel more confident, not realizing that creativity is not about qualification, but about willingness, not about perfection, but about authenticity, not about having something to say, but about saying something. The voice that tells you that your creative expressions are not good enough, not original enough, not important enough, is not the voice of discernment, but the voice of fear masquerading as wisdom. It is the internalized critic that was programmed into you by a culture that values conformity over creativity, production over imagination, safety over self-expression. The 30-second lesson strikes through your comfortable assumptions about your own goodness. You have been causing harm while believing you were helping, perpetuating problems while thinking you were solving them, and contributing to the very suffering you claim to oppose. The unconscious ways you have wounded others, the subtle manipulations you have disguised as love, the projections you have imposed on those closest to you, these create ripples of damage that extend far beyond your awareness or intention. Your need to be right has trumped your commitment to truth. Your desire to be seen as good has overridden your willingness to actually be good. Your attachment to your self-image as a caring person has prevented you from seeing the ways your caring has sometimes been invasive, controlling, or self-serving. You have been more invested in maintaining your identity as someone who helps than in actually helping. This recognition is not meant to crush you with shame, but to free you from the exhausting performance of perfection. When you acknowledge your capacity for harm, you can begin to cause less of it. When you recognize your unconscious selfishness, you can start making more conscious choices. When you admit your participation in the problems you critique, you can begin to be part of genuine solutions. The 33rd lesson reveals itself in the architecture of your daily habits. You have been living as if small choices do not matter, as if the seemingly insignificant decisions you make moment by moment do not shape the trajectory of your entire existence. The way you start your morning, the quality of attention you bring to routine tasks, the thoughts you allow to dominate your mental space, the media you consume, the conversations you engage in, the food you eat, the way you treat your living space. These micro choices are not separate from your larger life, but are literally constructing it day by day. You have been waiting for dramatic moments of transformation while ignoring the quiet revolutions that are available in every ordinary moment. You have been looking for external events to change your life while overlooking the internal choices that are constantly creating your experience. You have been seeking peak experiences and breakthrough moments while missing the sacred potential that exists in the mundane activities that fill most of your time. The quality of your life is not determined by the big events, but by the texture of your daily experience, not by the achievements you accumulate, but by the presence you bring to each moment, not by the destinations you reach, but by the consciousness you embody during the journey. When you recognize that every moment is a choice point, every action is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Every habit is a declaration of your values. Everything changes. The 34th lesson emerges from the shadows of your own resistance. You have been fighting against the very experiences that contain the medicine your soul most needs, avoiding the conversations that could heal your relationships, postponing the challenges that could develop your character, and running from the discomfort that could expand your capacity for joy. The situations you most want to escape often contain the exact ingredients necessary for your next level of growth. Your resistance is not protecting you, it is imprisoning you. Your avoidance is not keeping you safe, it is keeping you small. Your comfort zone is not a sanctuary, it is a cage that grows smaller each day you remain within it. The very experiences you have been running from, the emotions you have been suppressing, the conversations you have been avoiding, the risks you have been refusing to take, these contain the keys to your liberation. Life is not trying to punish you with difficulty, it is trying to strengthen you through challenge. Reality is not opposing you with obstacles, it is offering you opportunities disguised as problems. The universe is not working against you, it is working through you, using every circumstance as a catalyst for your evolution, every setback as a setup for your breakthrough, every ending as a beginning in disguise. The 35th lesson cuts through the mythology of your own independence. You have been carrying burdens that were never yours to bear, while refusing help that was always available, mistaking isolation for strength and vulnerability for weakness. The weight you carry on your shoulders, the problems you solve alone in the darkness, the pain you endure in silence, much of this suffering is optional, chosen not from nobility, but from a deep terror of being seen as inadequate, needy, or human. You learned early that asking for help was dangerous, that showing weakness invited attack, that dependence was shameful. So you built walls around your struggles, fortresses around your fears, and convinced yourself that self-sufficiency was virtue rather than wound. But in your determination to need no one, you have denied others the gift of giving, the joy of service, the meaning that comes from being useful to someone who matters. The help you refuse is not just practical assistance, but emotional witness. Not just solutions, but solidarity. Not just answers, but presence. When you insist on carrying everything alone, you rob both yourself and others of the profound satisfaction that comes from genuine mutual support, from the recognition that we are all walking each other home through this strange and difficult journey of being human. The 36th lesson reveals itself through the mirror of your own judgments. You have been condemning in others the very qualities you fear most in yourself, creating enemies from your own disowned nature, and then fighting wars that exist primarily within your own psyche. The people who trigger your strongest reactions are not random irritants, but precise mirrors, reflecting back the aspects of yourself that you have refused to acknowledge, integrate, or accept. The arrogance that infuriates you in your colleague may be pointing to your own unacknowledged superiority complex. The neediness that exhausts you in your friend may be revealing your own disguised dependency. The selfishness that appalls you in your family member may be highlighting your own unconscious self-centeredness. Every strong emotional charge is an invitation inward, a call to examine what within you is being activated by what appears to be outside you. This is not to deny that difficult behaviors exist or that boundaries are unnecessary, but it is to recognize that your emotional intensity around others' actions often reveals more about your own unhealed places than about their character defects. When you reclaim your projections, when you own your shadow, when you integrate what you have split off, the world begins to feel less hostile because you are no longer at war with yourself. The 37th lesson strikes at the foundation of your relationship with desire. You have been treating your deepest longings as embarrassing weaknesses rather than sacred guidance, suppressing the very impulses that could lead you toward your most authentic expression. The dreams that arise unbidden in quiet moments, the yearnings that persist despite practical impossibility, the visions that call to you from beyond the boundaries of your current life, these are not random psychological events, but communications from your soul about who you are meant to become. You have been taught to be reasonable, practical, realistic, to want only what seems achievable and appropriate for someone in your circumstances. But this rational approach to desire has cut you off from the irrational wisdom of your deepest nature, from the intelligence that knows things your logical mind cannot calculate, from the part of you that remembers what you came here to do before the world taught you to forget. Your most impossible dreams may be impossible only within the framework of the life you have been living, only given the assumptions you have been making about what is possible, only from the perspective of who you have believed yourself to be. But you are not who you have believed yourself to be, and reality is far more malleable than you have been taught to imagine. The 38th lesson emerges from the ruins of your carefully constructed identity. You are not the story you have been telling about yourself, not the collection of roles and labels and achievements you have accumulated, not the personality you have crafted to navigate the world safely. Beneath all these layers of constructed self-lies, something far more mysterious and magnificent than the persona you have mistaken for your true nature. The self you defend so vigorously, the identity you protect so carefully, the image you maintain so exhaustively. These are costumes you have worn so long you have forgotten they are costumes, but every crisis, every breakdown, every moment when the familiar structures of your life collapse is an opportunity to remember who you were before you became who you thought you needed to be. This dissolution of false identity is not death but birth, not loss but discovery, not ending but beginning. When the masks fall away, when the performances become impossible to maintain, when the old stories no longer fit the new reality of your experience, you have the chance to meet yourself as you actually are rather than as you have pretended to be. The 39th lesson reveals itself in the texture of your daily experience. You have been living at a distance from your own life, observing rather than inhabiting, analyzing rather than experiencing, thinking about reality rather than being present to it. The constant commentary running in your mind, the endless evaluation and comparison and judgment, has created a buffer between you and the immediate aliveness of this moment. You experience your experiences through the filter of memory, comparing what is happening now to what happened before. You interpret your sensations through the lens of expectation, measuring current reality against imagined futures. You analyze your emotions rather than feeling them, understand your relationships rather than living them, plan your life rather than being alive to it. But life is not a concept to be grasped, but a reality to be embodied, not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, not a story to be understood, but an experience to be had. When you stop narrating and start participating, when you cease evaluating and begin experiencing, when you quit analyzing and start being present, something shifts. The world becomes more vivid, more immediate, more real. The 40th lesson strikes through your comfortable assumptions about growth and healing. You have been trying to transcend your humanity rather than fully inhabit it, seeking to eliminate your struggles rather than transform your relationship to them, attempting to rise above your limitations rather than find freedom within them. The spiritual bypassing that promises liberation through detachment, the therapeutic approaches that focus on eliminating symptoms rather than understanding their meaning, the personal development strategies that treat your psyche like a machine to be optimized, all of these miss the fundamental truth that your wholeness includes your brokenness. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not sick and in need of curing. You are not incomplete and in need of fulfilling. You are a whole being having a human experience that includes joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and ignorance. Your struggles are not obstacles to your awakening, but ingredients in it. Your wounds are not evidence of your failure, but portals to your compassion. The goal is not to eliminate your difficulties, but to dance with them more skillfully, not to transcend your humanity, but to embrace it more fully, not to achieve some perfect state of being, but to find peace with the imperfect state that is always your current reality. When you stop trying to be other than you are, you discover the profound adequacy of what you already are, and so we arrive at the final recognition, the truth that underlies all others. You have been seeking elsewhere what has always been available right here, right now, in the immediacy of your present experience. The peace you have been pursuing through achievement, the love you have been seeking through relationship, the meaning you have been hunting through purpose, the freedom you have been chasing through control. All of this has been present in every moment you have been too distracted to notice. The life you have been waiting to begin has already begun. The person you have been trying to become is already here. The happiness you have been postponing until conditions improve is available in this breath, this heartbeat, this moment of awareness that is reading these words right now. This is not philosophy but recognition. This is not concept but reality. This is not future possibility but present fact. You are already what you have been seeking to become. You already have what you have been trying to find. You are already home in the place you have been trying to reach. The harsh lessons are not punishments but gifts, not obstacles but gateways, not evidence of life's cruelty, but invitations to life's deepest wisdom. They arrive not to crush you, but to crack you open, not to end your story, but to begin your real story, not to prove that life is meaningless, but to show you where the meaning has been hiding all along. Every moment of suffering you have endured has been preparation for this recognition. Every mistake you have made has been training for this wisdom. Every disappointment you have faced has been clearing space for this understanding. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been in vain. Everything has been leading you to this moment when you finally stop running from your life and begin living it. The time for waiting is over. The time for preparation has passed. The time for living is now. Not the perfect life you imagined, not the ideal circumstances you hoped for, but this life, these circumstances, this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this opportunity to choose awareness over unconsciousness, presence over absence, love over fear, truth over comfort, aliveness over safety. This is your invitation. This is your moment. This is your life calling you home to yourself, calling you awake to what has always been true, calling you alive to what has always been possible. The only question that remains is whether you will answer.